There will eventually be 21 of these games, I'm pretty damn sure. I don't see it stopping.
They're not slowing down. And I'm not sure if you saw or not, but they just announced that they're going to continue with the RPG, which means that, we might see RPG remakes of all 7 games or all 6 games again.
I don't think they need to go back and remake the old ones in JRPG style, but I love that there's a new JRPG series being put out and is popular.
It's real good. I was playing it a bunch over winter break, and now that school's done, I'm playing it again and picked right up right where I left off, and it is still super fun. A lot of RPG games can feel really repetitive to me, but this one is fresh. There's a lot of different jobs, and it's just like the combat's still at some point interactive, so it's not like I'm just autopiloting the same thing over and over again, which it kind of feels like with some games I play. You find your rotation and you do it. This one is allows for a lot more kind of dynamics, as well as just you still got to have some timings, because if you time the hits, you get more effects and more damage.
Sounds like a little bit of Lost Odyssey in there, Super Mario RPG influence as well, in the same way the Lost Odyssey worked. There's some Final Fantasy job influence in there. And these are all fantastic mechanics from the RPG world, so I'm super stoked to play that game.
Yeah,
super stoked to play it.
Definitely tell it was people who are passionate about the genre and the style of games, and there's a lot of Dragon Quest references and stuff to it. You could tell that they wanted to do it right, and they didn't just shoehorn, hey, let's just make it RPG just for the sake of it. They're like, no, they really wanted to make this style of game
a good JRPG. I am psyched. So this is going to be interesting, this first section for Yakuza Kiwami 2, because we've done this section for Yakuza 0 and Yakuza.
Yeah, and
they're the same areas.
Yeah, and like I said, it's like with the Yakuza games, even though they're kind of the same, you're staying Kamurocho for the most part. What they'll do in a lot of the games is you're in different times. Like in 0, it's a prequel, so you're kind of in the 80s, and they do like 80s Japan very well. And as the series go on, and you start doing like the 90s and then 2000s, and then the latest one takes place typically in modern day. So even though the latest one isn't in Kamurocho, but it's still nice to see different timeline wise that they're going to use the same area, even though it's the same kind of map. It's still overall a different feel to what's kind of going on. 2 from 1 isn't that much of a change, I find. They're kind of it's a few years after, but it's not too much of like a full.
It's 1 year after.
All right, yeah, I was thinking of I was thinking of 3 for some reason. That one's a few. It's 1 year after. So it's not much of change. So it's kind of just the same. There's not a whole lot to expand on, but they do kind of go into the Yakuza side of things quite a bit, and the kind of underworld side of things. And there's a lot of kind of interesting places they create, a lot of interesting things that Majima's got going on, and a lot of stuff inside of there. I don't know if I'd say it's up on the tier of fully good compared to some of the other ones, but it's still nice that there's still a lot of fresh stuff that they've kind of put into it.
Well, it does get some credit here, right? Let's not ignore the fact that 0 came out way after 2. Just because I've already played it. So 2 really did introduce a new area. Like an entirely new area. You didn't go there in 1.
Yeah.
So there is a whole new map, a whole new area to explore. And while it was the same area I've already been to, because I played 0 before 1 and 2, it still was new when that game came out. And if you're playing them in a proper release order, you're going to be like, oh, wow, there's a whole new map here. So there was a lot of building there. And it talks a lot about the events that happened in 0 before you could have done them. So there is quite a bit of depth building there.
Yeah. I can't remember what the camp is called. The whole kind of homeless camp area.
Yeah, the hills. Kamurocho Hills.
Is it Kamurocho Hills?
That's what it's going to become. It's called Purgatory.
Purgatory, right, yeah. The Purgatory stuff was...
I remember the name!
Amazing. Yeah, I remember even today.
You know
I remembered one thing yesterday, and that was about it. I used all my memory power for that. That's good. Yeah, yeah. Purgatory. Purgatory is cool. I like the Majima stuff. The fight pits, I believe, is the problem with me with this game with my memory issues is that the games kind of blur together, and that usually would be a bad sign if like you can't tell where these are. But these games are just so good that every time I think of them, I just think of my favorite moments, and it keeps jumping between them all, and I have a hard time distincting them. Because when I originally played through them, I kind of went through back to back. Like as soon as I finished 1, I went right into 2, and as soon as I finished 2, I went into 3. So to me, it felt like one
long
coherent experience, and I just absolutely loved it. But I'm pretty sure the fight pits was in 2. I'm pretty sure Purgatory, I remember, was introduced in there, and that was
fight pits were introduced in 1.
I can't remember if it was 0 if they were in, or if it was 1. But I can't remember where Purgatory came in. But I do like what they did with Purgatory.
Or no, hold on. Was it 0 or 1?
Yeah, see, it's the problem. It's like when you play them in the order, but it's
because the fight pits were in Majima's area, right? Not in Kamurocho. Yeah. So it was 0 because you never go to that place in 1. 1 had more mini games. It didn't have like main focused mini games. You know what I mean? Like 0 was very much about the property management and the cabaret club. 1 was more just a lot of subquests because it's the first one. 2 was then Majima Construction and the cabaret. So the cabaret was introduced in 2. I've subbed for over 1 year, but it still won't let me unlock it. Maybe next month's sub. Yeah, 16 months. You should be able to, click the chat identity and, I don't know. I can. But I have nothing to change to. You'll get it. So is it okay? It's pretty good, but is it maybe not good enough to be good?
I still, like I say, I have a bias with them because they all kind of blend together, and I find this series as a whole is great world building. And even if it's not like a whole lot different from the previous game, it's still just a major part of it is getting put into this kind of Yakuza underworld. So, everything that kind of goes on into that.
So let's look at it this way, right? It plays on and builds on the first game, but it does not require knowledge of the first game.
Yeah.
So I think that's actually good, that it stands on its own and still builds on the series. Like, I don't know what more I would really want from it as a world building. You feel like you're in Japan. It's not like you're playing a video game. You're in Japan. There's all sorts of wacky, crazy stuff going on around you that makes it a little more game-ish. But that's just a not boring Japan to me. I mean, it makes me want to go to Japan and beat up people to make money.
And there's quite a bit they kind of pull into, because I mean there's the Korean mafia that they have in this one.
Yeah, the Jingwoon.
There's I can't remember the name of the people, the florist, I believe it is, with all the surveillance teams and stuff like that. And those are kind of neat additions.
The florist is in the first one.
Right. I'm going to keep doing this. It's going to be bad.
Yeah, no worries. I've got it pretty straight because I've been doing it slowly and reviewing them as we go. Yeah.
I've been watching them too. It's just, I don't know. I think it stood out for me more in the second because I think the role it played.
He becomes more human in this game.
Yeah.
He's more fallible. In the other one, he's sort of just this entity, but you do meet his son in the first game still. So you get a little bit of sense of family, but you don't get a good, he's just this fat guy. So what did chat think? If we're having issues, we need to know what you guys think. Okay, good, and why on world building in the Yakuza 2. We're kind of on the fence here. Well, maybe quickly check out what we gave the other games.
I think we've gave all Yakuza games a good on world building.
Oh, I think this one deserves the same as the other two.
Yeah, I don't think it is any less than the other ones.
Yeah, and again, it builds on them without relying on them, which is a difficult thing to do, and a nice shout out. How many times have you played a game where you're like, I have no idea what's going on, because they expect you to know everything else that's gone on already? Or shows, you know, like the Witcher series. Oh, you haven't played the Witcher game? Good luck. I mean, I guess maybe the game's popular enough that you can make a show just for its fans, but you should probably try to address a wider audience than that. A little bit of backstory, a little bit of world building goes a long way to making me care about your character. With a deep world and many facets of its underworld explored. So we get to see the Yakuza, we get to see the Koreans, we get to see the history of the Yakuza, and we even start digging into how the police operate and fun stuff like that.
Yeah, there's definitely quite a bit of depth there. And then there's still all the underworld stuff, Purgatory, stuff that Majima's got going on, which is always just strange and weird, but also just some kind of hyperbole Japanese culture in general, with just, you know, the stores and restaurants and the cabarets that are available.
Yep. So while Kiryu may be a pretty boring character, the rest of the cast around him definitely makes it a good. I mean, just having Majima makes it a good.
Yeah. Oh, it's always like Kiryu's. It's always an interesting thing because he's such a
Ubermensch.
Clean slate, but yeah, he's Ubermensch, but he's always like it's one of those things where when you get that Ubermensch style, you know, the games can be boring because you know nothing's ever really going to happen to them. But the way that these games are different is because it's everyone around him who's kind of at risk and in trouble, and that's where the kind of tension and issues come with, because, you know, Kiryu's going to do anything he can to protect them, but he can't always be there in the right time or always be there for them. So you're never really worried about Kiryu. Kiryu's kind of just like the lens or the vessel that you get to travel through, but it's always just everyone else. And even though he still can get damaged, like he gets stabbed and he gets injured and shot and stuff like that, and it forwards the story and adds conflict. You know, he's not really going to do much to him. You know, it still feels at least a bit real. It humanizes him a little bit, knowing that he can still, you know, be hurt and have, you know, downs or, you know, get knocked down, so he has to get back up. But the series really shines through its supporting cast as well as typically the antagonists. The antagonists are usually very well done in these games, including this one.
Yeah.
The bosses are just, you know, they're written and performed so well that you just, you know, immediately hate them. you wanna just kick their ass. They'll do things that, you know, immediately piss you off, or you can just tell that, you know, they're just not great people, or even if they're conflicted or flawed. Yeah. Sometimes it can be like, well, you're still going about it, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, like Ryuji Goda, the one from this game. I didn't like him. He wasn't a good person, but I understood him.
Yeah, and it's an important part of, you know, antagonist writing too, where, you know, bad people aren't just bad for the sake of being bad all the time, right? It's usually because they have, you know, certain motivations for that. You know, it can be, you know, maybe they need money for family, maybe they, you know, a quest for power, maybe they've been wronged themselves, or maybe this is just all they know. You know, maybe they were raised up like this. You know, it's a thing that translates to real life too, where it's, you know, a lot of people who it's easy just to judge them at face value and assume that, you know, they're just bad for the sake of being bad, when it turns out, you know, things are a lot more complicated, and, you know, it's not always directly a person's choice that the way they are, why the things they are, you know, it's kind of just the product of the environment.
While Kiryu is your typical stoic pillar, the supporting cast is full of character and surprises. This is one of the high points of the game.
Really is. Like, it's main reason I play Yakuza games. It's for some silly mini games, some silly sub stories, and mostly just the cast. The main story cast is just always so well done.
Yes, big agree. Storyline. Oh, hey, you know what I didn't do? Share these. Let me get that shared. Copy link. Done. There we go. There you go. There's Yakuza. Get it spamming too. We'll get it spamming, but there's the Yakuza one. And then I'll take my dab. And you can go ahead and talk about story while I do this. And
Sure.
even fill it in if you like, because now you got the link.
Yeah, I do. That I do. It's not a surprise what it's going to get.
Bad.
Yeah, it's a Yakuza game, and it's the main draw for a lot of these games. Is just its story. It is so well done. It's just it's a crime drama done to like the highest degree. Could compete, with stuff that's in cinema and on TV. It's very well written, very well shot. Cinematography is always great. Voice acting and performances are fantastic. The story itself keeps you engaged throughout the whole thing. They're typically very well paced. Games can be really hard to write for because you kind of control the pacing yourself, and you can have a situation that's very serious, and then you can go do kart racing or go do mini games for a while, and you can kind of lose that distinction. But they do a good job of at least breaking at appropriate times and kind of making sense of like, okay, well, things will pick up the next day, so you can go wait a while for a phone call to happen, even though sometimes it's not communicated too clearly, and it can be a weird mechanically wise, because you're just kind of like, well, what am I supposed to do? But at least for continuity's sakes, they can kind of keep momentum when they need it. But the story, without spoiling too much itself, it really keeps you engaged. It changes in ways that aren't always expected, even though some things are cliche, and you can kind of have an idea of how things are going to resolve. You don't know exactly how they're going to resolve. So when things are playing out, even though you can assume like, okay, I know who's going to triumph, you don't know how they're going to do it, or there's always things that pop up throughout the middle or near the end that makes you kind of think of like, oh, there's a lot more going on than I assumed, or all that stuff, and it really just kind of pulls you into this world and keeps you engaged.
There's one thing that I know about Yakuza. If there's only one thing I know, it's that no matter what you think is happening in the story at that moment, it's deeper.
Oh yeah. Layers. And what you think is happening is usually orchestrated in that way as well. So that you think that that's the case.
Yep.
It's a real testament to their writing that they have 7+ games, especially if you include Judgment and I mean, yeah, I guess 8 with 0. And mechanically wise, for the most part, they didn't change a whole lot. And even when they did change, like most action games and stuff like that, that stuff can kind of get old and get repetitive. It's not always going to keep players engaged, but it's a real testament to their writing that after 8+ games, people are still being drawn in and absolutely loving them. And it's because they've kind of found that system that works, where it's this really engaging narrative and really well done story writing, with combat and mechanics that are still fun and engaging, but aren't the main reason you play it. So it doesn't really feel like they're getting too old, because they're kind of what's expected, and you don't have to put a whole lot of effort into them, and they kind of just slow things up. But it's a real testament that like after this much time, that writing is still this good and this engaging that people will still look forward to the next games coming in the series.
Oh yeah, and anyone who's seen a movie sequel knows what happens to writing when you get into the sequels.
Look at Fast and the Furious. What happened after the second one? It just
that may
went
not
off the
be
rails.
the best example, because I don't really think the first episode was all that well written either.
No, but it's like how much it diverges. Well, look at even like, I guess they're not greatly written, but like it just shows how much a series can diverge from its original intention. Like Resident Evil, the first 2 were supposed to be kind of more serious, and then they found out that writing that stuff is hard, so they just go full silliness. And it's something that could have really happened with this series as well, but they've been able to consistently make it awesome. It's hard to think of any other series that will have this much writing outside of like TV show medium that can last for seasons. And even them, sometimes it's really hard for them to keep a season consistent or keep it engaging without having to rely on certain tropes or certain kind of cliches.
Wow, the recommended specs for Yakuza 2 are actually pretty intense.
They do a lot of physics, and it janks out a lot.
Yeah. Wow. I think we're at an okay on performance. Actually, yeah, I remember having to turn down my settings to stream it.
Yeah, the PC
Cleanly.
port doesn't seem like it got a whole lot of love compared to the PS4 port. I did play it on a Pro, so that definitely helps, but I didn't notice too much. But it does seem that if you're going to be playing on a PC, which is the one that we're reviewing here, it's not hugely optimized, and there will be probably some issues. You may have to turn down your settings.
Yeah, I mean, if I have to turn down my settings, you probably have to turn down your settings. I started by maxing everything out and getting a bit of a slideshow, and I went, oh, that's bad. So the recommended specs is a Core i7 6700, 3.4 gigahertz, 16 gigs of RAM, and a GTX 1070.
That's a lot of RAM.
Yeah. That's a lot of video card, too.
Yeah. 1070. Yeah, especially nowadays. Yeah, is that the minimum or is that recommended? I guess
that's recommended.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
If that was minimum, I was gonna be like, holy shit. But yeah, okay, recommended. Okay.
That's still quite a bit for recommended.
Yeah. Especially when a PS4 is nowhere close to those specs.
Yeah, the minimum is an i5 3470 3.2 gig, 4 gigs of RAM, and a GTX 660.
That's quite the range.
Yeah,
that's 4 times the RAM for recommended.
So they probably have quite a variety of asset quality to pull from if they're dropping the RAM that much.
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, there's probably a fair bit going on. It's also depending on who wrote the recommended and not.
That's true. But we're gonna go okay.
Yeah, definitely wasn't the smoothest.
If you have the power, it can run smooth. Just don't turn the settings all the way up. Consider a PS4 Pro if your PC is not up to snuff. We'll throw that in.
Yeah, it seems like it's pretty optimized for PlayStation, and that's kind of the thing too to kind of put out there is that with PC it can be very hard to develop because when you're doing it on consoles, you know the hardware 100% that it's going to be used on, so you can optimize it directly. When you're on developing for just PC as a whole, like even for Day's and I's case, like he's got a high-end AMD card and I have a high-end NVIDIA card, so we might get completely different performances out of it just due to whatever they used on rendering side of things or whatever kind of driver support there was at the time and all that kind of stuff that may even be out of their control.
Yep, that's all true too. AMD varies greatly by driver version in stability and performance. Yeah,
and as well as like depending on what libraries they use, certain things run better on certain cards, and with higher budgets, you can find what works on both. But depending on what they have at the time, it could be one, could be the other. It's unfortunately can be kind of inconsistent.
I mean, we're at an okay still on animation.
Yeah, I do like what they've changed with the combat and how it's a little bit less interrupted, but it's also just so goddamn jank with the physics. I love it, but my god, it's janky as hell. Getting possessed halfway through the fight and floating around.
But animation, and it was fun. It was janky as hell.
Yeah, it's almost there. If there was the very, like, it's a system they need to get away from what was before. When you get kind of interrupt canceled or animation canceled, and then all of a sudden they have the same falling backwards animation. Well, maybe they were just getting up or they were crouching forward, and it kind of just snaps to it, and it's that kind of stuff that having smoother transitions makes the overall animations feel great, and having it all physically based is nice, especially with ragdolls. The only problem is now is that they're still very like what's the word I'm looking for?
Polished?
Yeah, they're not polished. They're still quite rough. They're very stiff is what I'm looking. They're very stiff ragdolls. So when they kick into a ragdoll state, they're going from a very fluid fighting animations to just very kind of like they it's like they're dead and have rigor mortis instantly and just kind of like stiff up and fall over, and it can look kind of silly, but it's getting there. It'd be a real nice animation system to see where you're going from fighting to right to ragdoll without having any kind of direct jumping and have a nice tween effect into it. So it's definitely an improvement, but it's still pretty jank.
Yeah, preserve the animation state as you apply the ragdoll so they can like be in their combat pose and just kind of fall over.
Yeah, it gets real hard when you start implementing physics into it too, because you need to get the momentum from the animation, and you're not calculating animation or physics into animations. So when that happens and you go from an animation based or like a skeleton based keyframed animation to a physics based one, you're not going to know, well, how fast, was he crouching? Because when you're going to hit them, you need to take into fact the physics of that to be able to know how far to throw them back. It's just going to take them as a still with no velocity or acceleration and then apply a force to them. So that's when it feels jank, but it's not impossible, but it'd be really nice to see once we get to that state where we can have that kind of stuff in it. It'll be real cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And for anybody wondering, well, why don't you just figure that out? Well, that adds more process time on every single frame of render, and it's going to cost you frames per second. Guaranteed. Like, you'll notice the hit.
We're still quite a ways from having the processing power for that, especially for many things on the screen at once. Even the physics we have nowadays, the best of physics is still heavily cheated.
Yeah, yeah. And you gotta think of the exponential increase that you're actually getting when you have multiple objects on the screen. Like, if it's just two things on the screen, like a fighting game, it becomes very easy because you're just checking this object to this object and this object to this object. But as soon as you add a third item that has, a potential for collision to the game, then you have to check this to this and 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 this to this. And all of a sudden you're checking all over the place for collisions. And then, a fourth item, a fifth item, a sixth item. And then you think of how many items you see on the screen in modern games. That becomes a lot of math, back and forth, all over the place, every single time it draws a frame, just to see if anything's hitting each other.
Let alone calculating what to do once they do hit.
Yeah. Style in Yakuza.
Trying to remember how much, because like 2 really kind of leads off of 1 again.
Yep.
But overall, like I said, I'm very biased towards it because I love it, and they do keep it consistent, and I do love their underworld. And even like the cabaret and stuff like that, the way that they do that in the world, that even just on its own there kind of stands out. And it is like a nice polished feeling. You do feel like this whole other, man, words hard today. It is feel like its own kind of world that's going on. The whole cabaret, the whole tournament, all this other stuff. Even though, because none of those people have any idea what's going on in the Yakuza underworld, that's just their whole life. And it feels like that too. That you can feel that's the whole, like it's a whole kind of area of this world. Its whole kind of history and what's going on. So that was good. The Yakuzas, of course, they're always well done. All the different characters that are in there. Majima is just a wild card. I don't even know what to describe. He's the one that breaks the inconsistency, but still somehow
fits in. Yeah, he fits in just, by being an outcast.
Yeah, it's like it's just they need it. Like, I can't imagine the game without him. It totally, like, him there just adds so much personality, but style-wise, he is on his own thing, which makes sense because personality-wise, he is on his own thing, and story-wise, he is just, it's like, what are you doing?
There.
I'm doing construction, or I'm gonna hide in giant traffic cones and fight you in the first one. It's always something wild, but it fits the personality.
I gotta admit, when I started playing the second game and I ran into Maja and he was like, I started a construction company, I was like, I did not see that coming. That was the last thing I expected from you, Majima. And then I realized that his construction company really just involved beating people up most of the time, and I went, oh, okay.
Yeah, like most of his ventures, it just ends up him fighting people.
Yeah, see, here's where I'm at. I'm at a good for style, and if anybody in chat disagrees with Yakuza period style being good, here's why I'm there. If you show me a picture of somewhere in Kamurocho, I know it's Kamurocho and I know it's Yakuza.
Yeah, and
it looks like Yakuza. It has its own look. Yakuza looks like Yakuza.
And like Salt and Berry and stuff like that. It's not even just like Japan. Like you can show other games that take place in Japan, but there's something special about how Yakuza games look and the feel that they have. That you can tell. You can tell the difference between, even just from the style, the lighting in the shops, of the streets, how they kind of design and how everything's kind of laid out. It does exist kind of encapsulated in its own world. Or even just the characters. You can just tell just from most of the characters, the game that it's from, or kind of who they belong to or what they are just from what they're wearing.
Looking at a picture, you can tell that it is Yakuza. Yep. And you really, that actually isn't, like, you think about that and you're like, yeah, if I look at a picture of a game, I know what game it is. But if you just look at a picture of an area in a game, you're not necessarily going to know what game it is. Like all of the high fidelity games that just go for absolute realism, if I just showed you like some pictures of trees, you probably wouldn't know what game it's from. They're, you know, a lot of them even pull the same tree assets. So, musical score. I think we usually give it an okay.
Yeah, they have a very competent score, and it's really nice in the fighting. It can get a bit repetitive. I still enjoy it. It doesn't detract from the experience, but there's definitely some room for improvements. Maybe some more kind of theming or more melodies added in for certain aspects or for certain people. But I mean, I really love the Majima Construction Victory song. That's a really big plus for me. But at the same time, it is always just the same one over and over again.
Yeah, it's short, luckily. And it is catchy as hell. Catchy as hell. So the score is simple, but manages to not be too repetitive. It does not draw attention away from the action or the drama, which is important. The music is not the focus of the game. It's not a musical game. There's
karaoke.
There's music. There's music there. It's in the game. You're never in silence. It never feels wrong. It never feels bad. It never feels grating. It never feels repetitive. I never thought I've heard this song a million times already while I'm fighting. It's just there, and it does its job. So it's fine. It's okay. Music's okay. If it was good music, if we were calling it good, then it would be like, yeah, you should probably go download this soundtrack. Go play the game because the music is so good. That's what good is. Like Thumper. Or Transistor. Or Risk of Rain 2. Or Doom Eternal. You don't even have to play Doom Eternal. You can just load into the level. And as long as you're not dead, just listen to the music. It's fine. The voice acting is always good.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know Japanese, so I don't feel super qualified to say that. But I still manage to get emotion and inflection and like a general understanding of what's going on in the conversation just based on the voice acting. So I'm going to assume it was pretty good.
Yeah, even if you took subtitles away for the most part of this and you don't understand the language, you can convey a lot of what's going on just from feeling, because they do a really good job of performing that and encapsulating it, you know, with their emotion and feeling and what they're saying and how they're saying it. It's pretty top tier from what I've experienced in games for how voice acting goes at the very least.
Yep. Up there with like Sekiro, which was amazing. That's the same way I see it. 'Cause I always play it in Japanese, or the Japanese Sekiro. I got so much across just from the tone in their voice. Like, oh, this guy's shady. This guy's gonna help me. This guy's troubled. You could hear it. Sound effects. Now, I want to say good because it always has me laughing, but in reality, they're probably okay.
Yeah, they're okay. There's not a whole lot going on for them. It doesn't detract from the experience at all, but at the same time, you know, a lot of stuff are just kind of reused assets from other games, and they can feel quite flat, especially if guns ever get taken out. The guns always, like, every gun kind of just sounds the same.
That's true.
Which is fine because it's not a main focus of the game, but it's still just like an area of improvement. Or, you know, the sound of when objects hit each other, or when you're hitting people, or when they hit the ground, or any of that kind of stuff. You know, it is sound banked, which is, like, it's not a negative thing, but, you know, just improvements to the quality of certain assets that could be added. wouldn't even say I'm not even sure if it's even fully needed for a game like this, but on a just examining it and analyzing on a technical note, it falls into the okay category.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to add much to the game by taking the sound effects up to a good level. It's not that kind of a game. It's not atmospheric. It's nothing like that. You know, it's not Dead Space. Dead Space is a better game because of that audio that they put into it. It brings all the feel through.
Yeah, and there's not a whole lot of like audio overloading kind of going on that you typically find in shooters, and that's why like audio and sound effects is really important in shooting games, because you know there's a lot of shooting going on and it has to sound good and has to sound, you know, somewhat realistic and can really add to that experience. And you can play, you know, older games that don't have that with, you know, repetitive sound files. You can, you know, even just to feel the two games is drastically different. But for a game like this, you know, it doesn't really, there's not always a whole lot of it going on at once, so it doesn't really need to have that kind of high quality asset for it.
The punch sounds good enough, and most of the time you're just punching people.
Yeah.
Pretty satisfying. Well, AI is okay.
Yeah, it's
I
never anything.
Right? I don't remember it ever breaking, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's not super easily exploitable, but it's not also like something that you really would call an intelligence. You can still very much feel the artificial, which is fine. Like this, it's one of the things where, you know, just because we're giving something an okay, it isn't a detriment to it. You know, there's a lot of genres and styles of games out there where, you know, they should have an okay. You know, you don't always want fighting games with, you know, perfect AI, because if you're supposed to be a perfect fighter and some really strong guy and the AI is super smart and can beat the shit out of you, you know, it's not going to go well.
You still want the fighting games to get a good in the AI spot. If it's a perfect AI, then it would be a bad, because it's just a negative experience and you can't win.
I meant like the style of it. Like this game is a beat 'em up. And there's room and improvement for how the AI behaves and like what they do and how they're kind of approaching things. But at the same time, you do kind of want them to be a horde of just kind of idiots that you could just get to throw around and beat up, because that's kind of the fun and charm of it, is just you're just some super strong person and these guys are kind of idiots that are waiting around for you to beat them up like henchmen. So it's not always, you know, even if it was great AI and they were, you know, super realistic and, you know, believably human, might not always add to the experience, because what, you know, was actually kind of fun about the game is that you're kind of fighting a bunch of idiots that will just stand there and let you walk up and grab them, and while you're throwing them into the other friend, the other ones will just kind of watch and stuff like that. They don't just constantly swarm you to try to win.
Yeah, it's the, oh hey, he's about to throw my friend right at me. That was basically how I played the game. The AI is very simple, while it, very simple. But it is not easy to break and should maintain a consistent experience.
You need that kind of middle ground where, you know, it's still, you can't exploit it, or the AI still will, you know, make a challenge and be believable and stuff like that. But you don't want it to be, you know, too strong or you know, too smart. It's in the middle ground between too dumb and too smart is a very hard mark to hit. And they still do it very well for these games.
They could still make it a good AI level, like us saying, yes, this deserves a good, and make it working for the game. Like maybe they could do stuff where certain enemies will start working together and they'll do different attacks in different teams, and you know, like you said, maybe adjust their pattern and strategy based on how you're fighting a little bit. Certain attack, even just adding in a chance to start avoiding and countering certain attacks the more you do them, so you can't spam one attack over and over. Little things like that. There's room, but it's absolutely fine the way it is.
Yeah.
Accessibilities. Does have double inversion. Doesn't need depth of field, really, being third person the way it is. What else we got? It's got different audio sliders. It's got subtitles. It doesn't need closed captioning. There's no color blind, but there's absolutely nothing actually in this one color related.
I wonder, the experience kind of is, but I'm not sure if there's a symbol that also
There's a symbol next to each one as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, they all have their own, like skill was a book and spirit was a star, and yeah. Was there key rebinding? I think there was.
there's controller remapping, and
Yep.
I don't know about keyboard, but the game's not really recommended to play on a keyboard. But if
Yeah,
there's
no.
controller remapping, I'd assume that they'd probably do the same for keyboard.
Yeah, yeah. If I've never seen a game allow controller rebinding without keyboard rebinding. I've seen keyboard rebinding without controller rebinding, but never controller without keyboard. Just the keyboard is too customizable of a device to not allow to rebind on it. That sounds like they've basically got everything.
Yeah, there's other smaller nitpicky things, but for the most part, most people should be able to play this. And I think even for karaoke, the buttons are still labeled, so it's fine.
Everyone should
Val.
be able to play this game. Hey, Val, welcome. You see people. Lies. I'm not people. Mechanics? Have you played Yakuza Kiwami 2, Val? It's on PS4. Did you play this one? We should consider both Majima Construction and Kiryu's Kissing Company for this.
Yeah, the mini games are definitely a focus on it.
Yeah.
If you just play the games for just the main story, including sub stories too, then you're kind of missing the experience and kind of a lot of the point of it as well.
Yeah, I'm not going to include the mini games and all the arcade games and stuff because those are like other games or just so small. But I feel like the Cabaret and the Majima Construction are major mini games, and it's tracked separately with those two games in the completion alongside the main story. They have their own story to them. There's a lot of major characters involved in them, so I think it's fair to consider them for the mechanics.
Yeah. A big thing about the second one compared to the 0 and 1 remake is that its combat system went back to what was closer to the original combat systems, which was no stances. You just have your one stance basically, and you use a bunch of weapons.
No, it did not have the card minigame. That apparently is never seen again. Oh, no, it didn't have that either.
Yeah, that minigame was strange. I don't think it comes back.
Yeah, the card battle game is rock, paper, scissors. Yeah, no, it did not have that. Though that was absolutely a stag beetle.
The mechanic wise, like the mini games are always very solid and very polished, even if it's not always something like the Cabaret ones weren't always something that I was super interested in. Majima Construction, of course, is pretty fun, and like they're still well done. Like their ability to make games within games is just fantastic. And then the game, like the main story itself, the fighting and stuff is going on there. It was a bit jarring going from the 0-1 with having stance to now not having a stance. Which for people who haven't played the originals, can be like, okay, well, what's going on now? But it still feels the same. You can still upgrade your levels, and you can unlocking moves that are similar to what were in previous stances before, and you can still kind of have those different fighting styles. There's a lot more weapons in this one, and it doesn't always do a great job of communicating that you should be using weapons. They're kind of just there, but they are that's typically what you should be using at all times. And once you figure that out, you're always stocked up on weapons, and most encounters are pretty easy. I feel like the weapons can be a bit too strong, but at least they can kind of add a bit more fun, especially with them all having their own finishers.
That was kind of why I didn't use them, is because they just trivialized it. Like, it felt like every time I pulled out a weapon, it was just like, okay, this is over now.
Yeah, it makes it really easy. And then without having them, though, sometimes it's like certain enemies, you'll just take out a weapon and go like, all right, you're big. You're kind of a thick guy. I'm going to just use a gun or a sword on you because I don't want to deal with your shit. But most other people, they just die in 1 or 2 hits, so then it's like trivializes a lot of it. So it's hard to get that middle ground. And then on bosses, if you don't use weapons, you're just like done. They're very, very difficult. But then with weapons, they almost can be a bit too easy.
Yeah, exactly. It was. I think I'm at an okay.
Yeah, it's definitely not bad. Very great, but there's definitely a lot of room for improvement and some polishing and figuring out certain things.
I thought the Majima Construction minigame was almost perfect. Almost perfect. It's not supposed to be super complicated. It had just enough depth to it. It was fun. It was responsive. It wasn't super difficult, but it did demand you actually pay attention and try at times. And it had its little spikes that forced me to retry once or twice. Never a ton. I thought it was really well done. And I'm a sucker for the cabaret game. There's a lot of depth to it, at least.
Yeah, there's a whole lot, especially like the unlocks, and the upgrades and stuff.
Could almost be its own game, 100%. Depth to the cabaret game. Combat is fine. Lack of stances does not really bother, as there is a nice selection of moves. Weapons are a bit too powerful and almost required. required at times. I definitely agree, like that first boss where you're like, use weapons!
Yeah, it's just impossible without it almost.
Yeah.
And then you use weapons and you're like, okay, and I just... You know, he is an intro boss, so he's kind of supposed to be easy, but it's amazing how much of a difference it is.
Yeah, it was silly. It was silly. I was just like, oh, okay, I just win now. Yeah. And I died and died and died to the point where I was like, oh, I didn't bring healing items. I'm stuck. They even put the cabaret minigame in the Fist of the North Star game by the Yakuza people. Crazy. They do love that game. It's actually pretty fun. I quite enjoy it. The bugs get bad.
Yeah, it was bad, especially. PS4 is better, but the PC one seems like it's just pretty buggy. And then some game ending ones where you had to reset.
Due to missed triggers causing clipping through buildings and empty cities. It was really bad. Really bad. I mean, it happened like 3 or 4 times. I wasn't even trying to break the game. It just broke over and over again. I think there was also one where if somebody hadn't told me that I had a trigger there, I would have just missed it. Well, several times on roofs. Yeah, and then all of a sudden I'm just on the floor again, on the ground again, and I'm walking around in the city and there's nothing spawned in the city. And I was like, oh, I think I'm in the wrong place. And then I'd fall through the floor and just through the world. I'm like, ah, oh, damn it. But the RNG was good because there wasn't any.
Yeah, or nothing that was at least identifiable, which is the main thing.
There's no major identifiable RNG moments in the game. This is a good thing for the game experience.
Yeah, like we usually say, like a main thing about using RNG in games is, you know, if the player isn't aware of it at all, that's a really good sign. And the other one is even if they're aware of it, if they're not, you know, hoping to get lucky, you know, if they're feeling like they got unlucky or they're so aware of the RNG system that they feel like they're gambling on it, which can happen with, you know, with a lot of roguelikes. It's usually why I didn't like a lot of roguelikes. And then, you know, like, oh, I need to get lucky on this run, or, you know, I need to open this and, you know, get this certain item. And if I don't, then, you know, I have to reset or my experience is screwed. And now you're kind of using RNG a bit too heavy, unless it's, you know, designed, it's supposed to be like a gambling feel. But even then, you know, it can be quite jarring and quite frustrating.
Yeah, we could look at something like, say, XCOM or XCOM 2, where while RNG is implemented straight, it's actually a negative experience for many people. Now, XCOM fans, don't go writing me angry letters, because I love XCOM and XCOM 2, and I liked the old ones as well. All right? All right, I'm not saying a bad thing about it. But you hear anybody talk about XCOM and XCOM 2, and they're like, oh, the terrible RNG, oh, I missed my shots with 95% chance. And people just hate it. It's a negative experience. It's not good. You can't call that RNG good. Though if they changed the RNG, they would ruin that game. I agree. It's part of the game. That is the XCOM experience. The XCOM experience is a shitty RNG experience. And that's why we love it. The thing is with XCOM, okay, real quick little rant for XCOM. just to support you. The reason people complain about those percentage chances is because they're usually sitting behind cover, shooting at aliens behind cover, and that is not how you play XCOM. You flank and you flush and you take your open shots. Never shoot at a yellow target. Always move to create a green target. Yes, that is how we play. The writing is good. The video is okay. The audio is okay. And the gameplay is okay. But there are some bad bugs. That actually sums it up. That's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
It's an okay game with some fantastic writing. Fixed on the Series X too. I like PS1 model textures. 93% chance to hit a stationary turret when my sniper is in an elevated position. Well, that just means that your sniper either didn't have a scope. Did you have a scope on them? The scope gives like plus 5%, I think, 10% if with a good one.
You sneeze, there's always wind, you know.
Yep.
Realistically speaking, like it's not always gonna be such a straight shot. There's always wind, there's always, you know, maybe the gun itself, you know, isn't always 100% reliable. There's always factors like that.
Yep. And 93% is pretty damn good chance to hit. Like you rolled a 1. If you were playing pen and paper and you missed, you rolled a 1. Okay? That's your chance. You had 2% over it. Getting a hum from you, I think, Pseudo.
Maybe.
I don't think most people can hear it at all. It's really low on the levels, but the level is actually moving. Oh, we didn't say anything for control. Game controls. Okay.
The combat's solid.
Should normally do what you want it to do. Does not break. And no real noticeable delay. Just that I'm pretty sure no other game has so many misses when... Yeah, well, we did a panel on this. I'm pretty sure you were there when we were talking about this, how a lot of games weight their percentages. And when they show you a 90% chance, you actually have a better than 90% chance.
Yeah, like a 90% chance is still a 1 in 10. And a 1 in 10 is, you know, may seem like it's infrequent, but that still is going to happen quite a bit, especially when you have a whole lot of other stuff going on. And another thing about these games to remember is that the failures are more memorable than the successes. So you can still have 9 successes and 1 failure, but you'll remember that failure more, and it'll feel like it's, you know, more common because you're not really remembering all the other successes that led up to it. So it feels like you're failing all the time, but really it's just that, you know, when you succeed, it isn't such a big deal that you're not really going to be remembering it. So it feels, you know, you're more remembering failures and successes, which then kind of leads you to think that you're failing more than succeeding.
Hey, Rubido, like as an example, also remember you're not going to miss 1 out of every 10 shots. That's not how it works either. You might hit 30 shots in a row and then miss 3 or 4. Now, that won't happen very often. The odds of that are pretty fucking low. But I've played the game many times, and you're damn right I remember that time where I missed 4 shots at 95% chance. That sticks out like a sore thumb. But yeah, no, I probably landed like 30-40 shots before that and cleaned up a big chunk of the game, and then it just kind of fell apart. Because you always quit when you're ahead, right? You go to Vegas, you're eventually going to lose your money. You play XCOM, you're eventually going to miss your shots. And welcome, Rubido. How you doing? It's time to talk about Brutal Legend.
Brutal.
And I really want to give this game just like goods across the board. I just do.
It's the charm. the charm carries it so much. But then breaking it down, it's just like there's not always a whole lot there. But it is very charming.
Your brain is tired. Brutal RTS at times. But even the combat was pretty fun. I liked landing, swinging my axe around, playing my guitar, dropping some chords on them. Face melting.
The face melting is great.
Face melter
With
was
the-
amazing.
With the animation that goes along with it, doesn't get
Yep.
old.
And the audio. Face melter! Can't forget the metal. No. So let's actually let's dig into it. Let's look at how good this game that we absolutely love really is, and be as brutally objective as we can be. World building.
The way I feel about most of the stuff, it always lands on that like high okay, where it's like I want to give it like great and good, but when I really think about it, it's mostly just the charm that's there, but the depth of the things aren't quite there for me to give it a good compared to some of the other games that get, good over, or they get good over okay. The world that they set, it's fairly unique. There are, quite a few cliches and tropes that they leverage on, which is fine.
That's actually essential, I'd say, to the
yeah,
game.
Yeah.
They needed it.
Yeah.
It's part of the game.
And for the most part, it's not like a bit more, originality would have kind of pushed that further to me. Would have been a bit more of that, made it a bit more memorable rather than it being kind of just more of like a parody.
Yeah, metal satire.
And a satire. Because it was kind of just watching a satire and a parody, which is great and experience and all, but if you have a bit more originality put into it, it can stand on its own a bit more. But what's there is like I said, it's still the world they created something that is still for the most part unique. Leverages a whole lot of stuff. I still enjoy it. It was cool to be there, but it still kind of lacked a bit of depth. There wasn't a whole lot of kind of it trickles in near the end of what's going on, what the Titans were and what's going there, and it's great and all, but it doesn't really give you a whole lot more to go on or a whole lot more of kind of backstory or lore to go into. It's very, very passable, especially for the age of the game and kind of console orientated. But it's for world-wise, it's hard for me to really say it's a brutal legend world rather than just kind of a metal world.
But the metal world is the brutal legend world. It's got lore, like there's history to it. There's wars, there's factions, there's unique locations. I remember the Lake of Black Tears very well. Bladehenge stands out well. There's actually and a lot of the areas are unique. Like each area that you go to for each boss has its own very distinct, unique look, but still looks very much brutal legend.
Yeah, I'd say that at least for this stuff, world building wise, it's still fairly strong. Like I said, it's mostly just kind of like, I guess, depth wise. I felt like it just a lot of it's just the charm. Like a lot of the charm was over me, and it's hard for me to distinguish between what was charming and what was actually, very engaging and very memorable. The world it's not too large, but it's also not too small. You can get around it pretty quick. There are like distinct regions. And they are fairly unique. So like I'm not against giving it a good, but it's also just like compared to some of the other games that we give to a good, and some of the stuff that's going on and how much depth that some of these other games that they have and how much depth that the game could have had, though it doesn't always need it. It's like I said, I'm kind of just torn between that of giving it like a very high okay versus giving it a good, saying that there wasn't anything too much more that they could improve.
I think a very high okay is still fair. But they definitely have all the elements that you want to see.
Yeah, it's definitely not obviously lacking in anything. Like a lot of effort was going into it.
I like the way he said that. The game is not obviously lacking in anything. A bit more depth would make this an easy good in our minds. The world is diverse and unique and still all fits. It builds lore and backstory and introduces factions, though though they may not be around for long. And that's probably the biggest thing, is it was just shorter.
Yeah, the game is fairly short, and it's kind of would have been nice to be longer, but of course that comes with a whole lot of stuff, and this game was already a very high budget game for what it is. And it's one of those unfortunate things where where a lot of the money went was kind of necessary for what the game was going to be, but unfortunately, it doesn't leave a whole lot else for, a lot of room to put a lot more time and a lot more depth and a lot more, every time we have some of these characters reading dialogue or any of this stuff, it's very, very expensive compared to other games. So like the game, even if it was made a couple hours longer, you're looking at a huge budget increase.
Yeah, you got to remember, at the length it's already like a $20 to $25 million game. It was a big budget, not cheap. And I think for that reason, the characters do deserve a good.
Yeah, it's one of the things that they're very charming, and it's like their writing can be very kind of like B level or like B movie level, but it's kind of intentional, kind of camp. And it is supposed to be like a parody and kind of silly, but they do have considerable growth for what's going on. The characters are very dynamic and change, at least the main cast. A lot of the kind of unit-based stuff don't really change too much and kind of say the same thing over and over again, but this is also just technical and budgetary limitations. But for the main cast, at least, it is a strong point of the game. Like, you do care quite a bit about them and what's kind of going on.
They are individual and unique people, too, with their own wants, desires, drives, goals. A lot of them have a similar end goal in mind. What other Rock Legends did it get besides Ozzy and Lemmy? Jack Black. Bowie. The Osbournes. Yeah, the Osbournes were in a side quest with the Bats. That's kind of Ozzy, though. But it was the rest of the Osbournes with them there. I don't know who else, but isn't that enough? just paying their salaries to get them all to come in and do lines and be modeled and everything, and then have their likeness used, that's expensive.
They have there's a lot of other just high-end voice actors too. Like the main demon was voiced by Tim Curry. Diviculus was Tim Curry.
Interesting. I thought I kind of recognized him. Gotta love Tim Curry, especially as the bad guy. He is a good bad guy.
He did a great job in It, the 80s version of It.
Yep.
Terrifying.
Storyline.
This is a really surprising part of the game because it's one of the things where people don't really expect a whole lot from it, but it really does a good job. It kind of paces well. It can start off a bit. It starts off fairly strong. It's a bit confusing at first because you're trying to figure out what's kind of going on, and it kind of just throws you in this world. But it is supposed to be kind of confusing because Eddie doesn't know what's going on. He's also new to this, so he's questioning what the hell is happening. What is all this? What is happening? But it ends very strong and without any spoilers and stuff. But you'll think it's going to be cliched. And it doesn't stray too far away from typical kind of storyline stuff, but it does add some fresh twists and turns to it.
You telling me you never saw the David Bowie there? Game sold 1 million copies, so it basically broke even with some profit. It made money, but not enough to justify the cost. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm so glad they made it. It's one of those... We talked about this in our previous panel not too long ago where we were talking about times AAA took a chance. And, to spend $20 million on this, that's bold. I'm going to go with bold. I'm glad they did it, but I wouldn't have put my money into that.
Yeah, especially when metal isn't the most popular genre in this time right now anyways, right? Like in the 80s and 90s I could see it because rock and metal was
everything,
really kind of peaking and everything, and now it's kind of more on that nostalgia. So the limited fan base right at the get-go, a lot of people who aren't aware of metal aren't really going to be too intrigued with this or even really kind of get its charm or understand a lot of the theming.
So I've put story at okay, but it's so close to good.
That's how I'm gonna feel about most of this stuff. Is that it's just so close to good. It's like a lot of this stuff is very high okay, and the charm really does help. But it's and it's not a bad thing. It's just one of those things where, I think if a sequel got made with maybe a bigger, or the studio size is increased and a higher budget, it could really be a super awesome experience. But just compared to some of the other games that are out there, it doesn't kind of meet the level of what good kind of brings.
Loaded terms, okay, good, bad now, but yeah, that's how we have to use them. And good is, remember, good is you should play it just for that. Like, if you just like a story and you just want a good story, then this is the game for you. Double Fine games are decent, but Tim Schafer kind of off-putting, though. Yeah, they're fine. I don't know if I'd call them double fine, but they're fine. I did not play Psychonauts.
I played a bit of it. It's definitely a strange game.
Performance, it's good.
Yeah, especially for the
If you
PC
have
port.
a potato, you should be okay. Yep, that's what I'm going with. If you have a potato, you should be okay. The animation is a solid okay.
Yeah, definitely a whole lot of room for improvement. Nothing really too bad.
There's a lot of
kind of lacks
room.
depth.
Improvement, but at least they didn't T-pose. Yeah, I'm going with that. Best thing I can say about it. There's no T-posing. Nope. No rage today. He'll be back next week. He's been gone for about 3 weeks now. He's in the middle of a move. And he moved, like, to the interior of the province many hours away. So, he got internet yesterday. And he's getting his house set up. And he should be back next week. Style, I think, is actually good. I think it deserves a good here. I love everything about the style. It is so metal.
Yeah, it is. It is very. The only thing I think is it's like how consistent it is, but it is still consistency-wise. It gets difficult because they are branching across kind of different genres. But I think it's kind of just what was needed anyways. It adds to the game rather than subtracts to it. Even though going from a lot of metal stuff to then kind of the emo or kind of the other stuff. On a stylistic sense can clash, but I think on its overall experience, that was the kind of point. You needed to have those kind of clash of worlds.
Yep. And they still have the same style to them. They look completely different, but they still have the same, use of angles and the way pieces are put together.
The lighting and shading is consistent.
Yeah, there you go. Lighting and shading. Yeah, but the way they used the geometric shapes, like nothing straight lined. Everything always angled and bent, and yeah. Beautiful. Okay.
Yeah, I want a musical
What
scores
do you
maybe, right?
What do you expect us to put here? It's Brutal Legend.
It's one of the best soundtracks in a game, period. And it's not just that it's a great soundtrack, but it's utilized fantastically too. Like when the tracks that play, they play at very appropriate times, and like high-paced metal rock tunes are playing when you're in high-paced action events and driving and stuff like that. And even the kind of slower, sadder tracks, or even like when they use Mr. Crowley, I think that's like a beautiful time and a perfect time to play that track. And it just because they had the score doesn't mean they used it appropriately. And for this case, it's great that they had a great score, but also used it, in appropriate settings.
Fantastic, amazing, but they also used them in the perfect places. And I agree. You can have the best score in the world, and a lot of people just be like, hey, we've got all this metal, just let it play. But no, they put the right songs in the right spots. They captured the mood of the songs with the mood of the game. They captured the mood of the song with the mood of the moment. They captured the pace of the song with the pace of the game. And then they took that whole library of fantastic music and they shoved it all in your car's stereo so you could also listen to it whenever you wanted. Perfect. This is a song that played during the Bowie fight. I think it was a Crew song. I do remember some Crew at that moment. I do distinctly remember some Crew moments early on.
Yeah, there's definitely a few tracks of Motley Crue in there.
Yeah. It might just happen to play during that era. I think they're just playing a set list of hair metal at that time. Voice acting. Good. Some of the biggest names we've seen in a video game. Jack
The main
Black,
cast
Tim Curry.
is well done. Some of the supporting stuff, like the unit characters and stuff, it's passable. It's okay. But I think just the main cast, of course, just pulls it up to a good. It's kind of a surprising note, and Jack Black gives a phenomenal performance.
He always
has
does.
So much energy. Much energy.
He always does. To both of those, he always gives a phenomenal performance, and he always just has so much energy. I love Jack Black. I've heard mixed opinions on Jack Black. Not everybody loves Jack Black, but you know what? There's a lot to love about Jack Black. There really is. He's just a fantastic human being. Sound effects. You love Jack Black except King Kong. He was probably the only thing I liked about that movie.
Yeah, I still liked him in that. It was a weird role for him to play, and I don't think he was written fairly strong for the kind of character that he is. But he was still, I still loved seeing him. Loved him in Mars Attacks. Even though it's kind of a bit of a minor role, he plays that role very well.
I forgot that he's in that all the time. Man, that movie had everyone in it.
Yeah, it's one of those movies you go back and watch it and you're like, whoa, I know that person. Sound effects is one of those other ones where I'm like, I really want to give it a good because of all the charm it has, but it kind of falls to a high okay for me because I really love the solos, I really love them and stuff, but the combat and those kind of ends of things, it kind of falls flat to me. It is this, a lot of assets are just kind of played again and again, and the same hits are the same, and even when you are doing your like guitar attack, like there's not really any sound that's there. I would have really loved some riffs that you cycle through for that point. It just kind of shoots lightning. Do really love it. Really do want to give it a good, but it does kind of just land in that high okay.
Yeah, I agree with you entirely. I was of the same mind. And yes, go look at the cast of Mars Attacks, and as you go through it, you'll just be like, I don't what? Huh? What? That movie had literally everybody in it. You are now. I want to hear all the ones that surprised you. We kind of blasted through this one like way too fast. How did we do that? We spent an hour on Yakuza and then did Brutal Legend in like 20 minutes? You're ready for the biggest WTF moment.
Yeah, like Jack Black plays a pretty major role in it too. It just people don't always remember it as that because it's a short role in the film, but you go back and watch it now and you're like, oh, that's Jack Black.
Val better be here for it. Yeah, I agree. Val's got to be here to laugh at me. He can laugh and make fun of me as I die. Over and over and over and over again, trying to figure out the Neo 2 combat system. I look forward to it. I also look forward to Monday when I get to play Resident Evil 8. I don't care if everyone else is streaming it. I want to play it. I'm not doing it because everyone else is streaming it. I'm doing it because it's Resident Evil 8. And I loved 7.
It looks to be an improvement over 7 too. It looks really good.
RE8 looks great. You can't watch 3. You're planning to buy it. Oh, you can't watch. You're planning. Not 3. That's a The like ooh like type mouthy thing. Yeah, okay. I gotcha. Yeah, I understand. Oh, that's a sad face? I don't know that as a sad face. So far it seems like perfect blend of 7 and 4, and I haven't played 4 yet. So it'll be interesting for me, because I actually had 4 coming up on my backlog. Let's see how long it takes for me to pass out. Who wants to take bets? Yeah. Well, you can start bets, Lo. You can even, like, gamble channel points on it. The mods have the ability to create bets. I'm not sure how it's done, but there is a way. We talked about this before. I think I have it on. Pretty sure I do. I don't think I can turn it off, actually. Manage moderation settings. Let's check it out. Oh, wow, it pops it up where my chat used to be. That's not useful at all. Well, I can no longer see chat. I'm now looking at moderation rules. Whatever. Yeah, no, that's not in there. Okay, can we go back to my chat, please? No? Okay. Back. Yeah, there we go. Your follow list is a wall of RE8 right now. I'm proud to say that I looked at my follow list, and of like 8 or 9 people that I had on my follow list, one of them was playing it. And I was like, oh, right on. I've got a diverse crowd of people here. AI in Brutal Legend. This is actually an interesting one to discuss because it uses a lot of units.
Yeah, I still don't know how I feel about the whole RTS mechanics that they brought into this. They're overall, like, there's not a whole, like, for each individual units they do their own thing, but there's not a whole lot kind of going on. It is, like I said, this game is from 2009, so it is at this point, you know, close to 12 years old.
Yeah, but RTS was pretty deep in 2009.
Yeah, but I was like, you gotta remember it was console first, so it's
Yeah.
like it was really weird. Like, we'll talk about it more in mechanics. It was a really weird decision to do that. But if you just think outside the RTS context, when you're just fighting units, there's not a whole lot that kind of goes on. They kind of just run into a place and attack. Most part for the enemy. I mean, you control the ones that you have, and they respond to you fairly well. But the enemy ones are kind of just there, and most things that attack just stand still and do attack, and then kind of die.
Yep.
So it's passable for what it is, because it is an RTS, and that's just kind of how they are. It's just a very weird choice for what the game could have been.
So it sounds like we're kind of at an okay.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I have to respect the limitations of the time, and the units that were there, and it's just, you know, it doesn't subtract too much from the experience, doesn't add a whole lot to it. I mean, they're not super breakable, but the game's also not very punishing on death anyways. It just kind of felt like a weaker point of the game, which is kind of a lot of how some of the enemies behave and kind of how they are.
Yeah, I mean, it utilizes the property of they will stop an attack when they get in range, and then just sends in groups so that when the ranged get within range, they'll stop and start attacking, and that allows the melee units to move in and create gap, and that was about the only strategy they used. But there wasn't a whole lot more strategy involved in it anyway. They mostly just attack your closest fit merch booth, and that's it.
Yeah, it's not so much like the AI is a problem. It's mostly just the design and the mechanics that were there aren't really something that could allow for the AI to really complement it too much. Like, there's a whole lot of problems. It's not so much just AI, and we'll talk about more in mechanics. But yeah, it's just for what's there. It's fine. I mean, your units do what you kind of tell them to do. You know, the enemies are there to kill, and the boss fights are, you know, they're scripted, so they're okay. But it's, you know, overall very okay. I wouldn't complain and say the AI is terrible and it's like getting stuck and not pathing properly, but it's also just very much like very artificial.
However, it also did not break and allowed a clean experience for the player to progress. It never got in my way. It was a very consumable game that way. It was just continue on, kill and continue, kill and continue, kill and continue, kill and continue, kill and continue. Now, I'm no RTS newbie or anything like that, so that may play a role in it, but I just rolled over the enemy every time. There wasn't any real resistance or friction or anything.
No, there's no strategy. The AI doesn't pose any actual threat besides just pumping out units and telling an A clicking on a resource geyser.
Yep. Play a riff on the geyser and win.
Yeah, they strangely put a lot of effort into the RTS stuff and they wanted to have it there, but it just kind of, we'll get more into it in mechanics, but it just falls flat in a lot of places.
Yeah, I've got a lot to say when we get there, thankfully. I am looking up the options. Oh, right. I remember the options. Draw distance, FOV, had individual audio sliders, more video settings than I really expected for a console port from that era, but that's not really accessibility. It did have subtitles. Oh, that was actually something I noted. It had subtitles and closed captions. It even closed captioned like thwack, thud, dies, ballista hit, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true.
I think it deserves a good there.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything that would be removed would mostly just be even more niche kind of side picking things, which weren't too common back then too, which would be like how much motion shake there is, and gore sliders and stuff like that. But I don't think that would detract it from getting it good for having remappable controls, audio sliders, closed captioning. Another thing I guess is kind of color blindness is a big one.
What's the color in the game?
There's not too much. Like anything that's like the action based or symbol based, for the abilities that you use and stuff like that. So I don't think there's a whole lot that's really there.
Yeah, everything was positional. Everything was in a spot somewhere on the screen. It was really basic. I was actually super impressed by the accessibility. I remember when I was playing. I was paying attention to a lot of it. I was like, wow, they have that, huh? Wow, they have that, huh? Wow, they have that, huh? Holy crap. Yeah, once again, so much more than I expected from a console port from 09. Oh, mechanics.
Yeah, I find that this game suffers from the too much scope, not enough focus. They tried to do a whole lot here.
Yeah.
And I think they tried to be really unique, and I think they had a vision of something, and I think they just couldn't reach their vision for whatever reason. If it was, technical limitations, or maybe they ran out of time or budgetary. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't really feel like it's shoehorned, but it feels a bit half baked. And like the main thing that kind of feels half baked is the RTS mechanics. It's a very strange system to kind of go with. Implemented okay.
Implemented half-assed.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where it could have been cool, and I feel like they probably had granular plans for it, but then maybe just ran into roadblocks. But I feel like it just would have been so much stronger if it was even just a more cliche, action beat them up. I
agree.
It just, even if you still have the same units, maybe you squad up and maybe you treat it more like a Dynasty Warriors. I would love, just Dynasty Warriors, but metal, but just chaos everywhere, and, metal playing in the background, and you're fighting people with cool finishing moves and stuff like that. But the RTS stuff really kind of makes pacing very weird, because you start off so slow in the combat, and it does get very competitive, and then the combat itself is very kind of shallow and hollow. You have two different attacks. You've got your guitar attacks, and then you've got your kind of melee attacks for a bit, and then that's kind of just it. There's not a whole lot of depth to it.
Yep. The lack of depth even beyond that on the RTS side is what I was seeing is there's no unit counters.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that. It's just this unit is ranged and this unit is stronger than that unit.
And the units themselves, they fit the roles, and there's not too much originality. Like, there's originality in the design and what they are, but I mean, for what they are, you kind of always just find your build order and that's it. There's not very anything situational that you find in a lot of RTS games where it's like, well, depending what your opponent is, you have to build a certain thing, right? For this game, it was always just, honestly, it didn't really matter what you built. If you just built things and sent them in, you'll probably be okay.
Yeah,
There's
they
no
just don't build the first units. They become kind of useless quickly. Build the later units after you upgrade and you're fine.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like, yeah, there wasn't enough design into the RTS to allow for strategies to develop.
Yeah.
It was all kind of just very surface level. There's kind of some neat stuff going on, but there's nothing there that you can really dive into and find like optimal strats or, have any sort of competitive edge or any sort of kind of, it just no matter what you did, you kind of just steamrolled. I don't know.
Go ahead.
I say there was a focus for multiplayer when the game first launched, and I don't know if I ever really played the multiplayer, but I couldn't see it really, developing too much. It would still feel kind of a bit cheesy. It would probably end up with someone finding some cheesy strat, and that would probably just steamroll, and that would just kind of what happens to everyone, because it seems like most things are fairly mirrored depending on who you play. There's not like when you find with a lot of kind of RTS genres is that you'll find distinct, races or distinct civilizations that have strengths and weaknesses, and that's kind of you start playing your rock, paper, scissors. But this one, that kind of everyone felt like they were the same, cookie from the cookie cutter, and you just have a different flavor slapped on top.
It's back to Warcraft.
Yeah, but even like Warcraft,
I was going to say even Warcraft had a little bit of difference.
It distinguished itself in a lot of the heroes too. This game has heroes.
No. Warcraft.
Oh yeah, I'm thinking of Warcraft 3. Yeah, original Warcraft.
Yeah, original Warcraft was literally a copy paste of the units with a different skin. They had like 1 or 2 units at endgame that were different. That was it.
Yeah, I would have loved this game more in the sense of, like a Dynasty Warriors, even though it would be kind of a repetitive beat 'em up. This is the kind of perfect genre for repetitive beat 'em up. It's a lot of charm. It's silly. It doesn't take itself serious. Just make the beat 'em up fun. The combat in this game was, it's everything kind of just felt okay. It didn't. I want to either if they went RTS, I would have rather it just been focused on just RTS and really kind of solidify that. Or if they just focused on, an action combat beat 'em up, then they just kind of focus on that and make that the game. But kind of trying to combine the both didn't really fit too well. And that happens with a lot of other RTS games that try that. And one of my favorite games of all times, which is like Civilization Rise and Fall, which is an RTS game that allows you to control heroes and go in. It's still, like on an overall level, very cheese, because when you control a hero, you now need to be strong and you just do so much damage that you can kind of just steamroll, and it becomes very hard to balance because, if the hero dies too much, then, it's frustrating, it doesn't feel fun, and if the hero is too strong, then, you're not really an RTS game, you're an action beat 'em up.
Yep. I thought that at least the hero's power was balanced well enough that when I saw like another enemy hero on the field that I could land and beat it up because it was going to chew up my units. Things like that were... But that's like literally the level of depth of strategy to the game.
Yeah,
that was the limit to the thought I had to put into it.
Yeah, and at that point, it's like you're just kind of an action beat 'em up because you just land and beat them up. And then at that point, I much would have rather just had, even if the RTS mechanics were controlled by something else and you were just a unit and there's like big war, then that would it's like the Dynasty Warriors approach where it just tells you where to go and to take an outpost or to do things, and there's other enemy big units that you have to fight and stuff like that. I think would have been a cool approach rather than having, giving the player control. I feel like didn't really add to too much. It kind of was like every time I was doing RTS things in this game, I didn't feel like, because a nice thing about the point of RTS games is there's satisfaction in the strategy and the feeling of, the conflict of planning your movements and planning your units and having, a set thing you want to accomplish and then doing it, where this game, you're kind of just waiting when you're in the RTS mode. You're like, I just want my units so I can go in and kind of fight, or I kind of just want them to do this thing, and you're kind of just watching, and there's not a whole lot of involvement, and the pacing gets very weird because, RTS games, you typically have to have quite a bit of interaction and management, but then with this game, you still need to fly around and do things, so there'd be too much to go on to do it great for both levels. It had to, make compromises somewhere, and unfortunately it made compromises on both, so it just doesn't lack depth on either mechanic.
Yep, it's another Spore.
Yeah.
It's entirely another Spore, but this one was in a world that we enjoy, so we enjoyed it.
If it was 100% like RTS, like, and this is like not saying they should have done this, it's just a random idea. It would have been really cool to have it, be a full concert, and like the better the concert, the resources you have, the bigger concert you're going, you get like a horde of fans, and the horde of fans become the units, and then you have units that kind of lead them, which are kind of your special units. But it would be really cool to kind of see that, and then that's what you use to attack the other bases. You're kind of just generating these fans and then using them as to fight the other concert that's going on, rather than kind of having your kind of like, at times you don't really have that many units, and they're not that unique.
You're also
and
looking at PS3 limitations for how many units you can have, right? You don't want to be Heavenly Sword.
Yeah, and that's what I said before. Like, I wasn't saying they should have done this.
Yeah.
This is just like going back and thinking about it. If they wanted to go RTS, and then that comes back to, then they shouldn't have done an RTS on a PS3, because your competition is Halo Wars, and we know how that went.
Yeah, it didn't go well either, and it had the Halo name behind it. Halo doesn't usually fail, even if it releases something like ODST, people still buy it and play it.
Yeah, I commend the effort, but yeah, I just wish it would have been. It's like I say, it's a focus thing.
So is the mechanics okay, or are they bad?
A lot of people would say they're bad. I didn't mind them. Like I said, they're repetitive, but there's a whole lot of other stuff in the game that makes it fun.
Yeah, the other parts make the game fun. I agree. The mechanics were really the low part of the game, and every time I had to do it, it was like, okay, let's just get this over with.
I mean, like the other mechanics in the game, like the actual fighting, I didn't mind too much, and the using of abilities was okay. But
I liked the bosses actually. I thought they did bosses pretty well.
Like bosses were done well. Driving around the car and stuff is done well. Turret stuff is kind of boring. A lot of the kind of mini game stuff is very repetitive. It would have been a little bit less if the combat was a bit more juicy and a bit more satisfying. I do appreciate the charm with decapitation. Face melter is super cool and very fun to do, but yeah, like I said, it just kind of lacks depth overall. I wouldn't say that like if I kept having to play, I don't know how much more the mechanics would have worn on me. I don't know if I'd say they're bad to the point where it subtracted a whole lot from the experience. It was just kind of, I could see the potential, and me seeing the potential made me more aware of, how much lacking it was. But on its own, I'd still say, passable. It's just a low okay, not great. It's, bearable. It's not going to be inherently frustrating and feel stupid. It's just kind of, what it could have been, and you just kind of feel a bit disappointed while going through it.
We need chat to help us out here. Where are you guys at? A bad or an okay?
I feel like most people's bads come from them not typically liking RTS genres, and then they kind of feel forced into it, and then it can just be very frustrating.
Yeah, I could see that.
But
that's always a risk you run when you're running multiple genres. Though, but that could be why they made it so simple as well, is so that if you're not an RTS fan, you can still play the game and enjoy it. And a part of me was kind of thinking that while I'm playing the game, I'm like, should I be insulted? Are they just calling metal fans meatheads and making the game so simple that we can all play it?
Yeah, it was definitely, I think they were trying to make it as approachable as possible, because I think they already understood they were hitting such a niche market with it being metal focused, and then I think they just didn't do enough discovery into what the market would be, mechanic wise. Like if it's metal, you're going to be assuming it's going to be high paced action, because that's kind of what goes hand in hand with metal. And then they kind of put this into there, and it still could have worked. It's just, like I said, there's limitations that were there, and maybe they didn't have time to swap things, and they took a gamble and lost, which happens sometimes. But I think for the most part, minus the RTS stuff, which you can kind of mind, that you don't have to focus too much on it. You can go through and just attack things and make a few units and point things at it, but outside of that stuff, it's okay. I don't know how much the RTS mechanics will drop it though.
Are very simple and overly repetitive. We liked the mini Guitar Hero solos, but they are a very small piece of the game. The car handled well, and they clearly put a good bit of effort into that part. However, the main of the combat being RTS was super slow and very simple and unengaging.
We could do everything wrong with this game. That'd be a really interesting topic.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd be down with that. I've been looking for another one to do everything wrong with. Did you see our other everything wrong with and how to fix it, Rubido? I think you did. If not, you would definitely enjoy those. That's right up yo alley. Bugs. I didn't hit any, I don't think. We've only done one. I want to do more. You're supposed to crash that thing. That's the whole point. You got to hit things with it.
I don't know if you ran into... I remember there being minor things. Like there was at certain scenes, all of a sudden, like there'd be an artifact that would render weird, or like you get like a black line stretching out from someone. But I don't think there was anything gameplay-wise that would cause you to either crash or reset progress, or state lock you or anything like that.
I don't even remember getting any graphical artifacts or anything.
Yeah, they were very minor. Like it was just, yeah, I was like near the beginning too. It was just like someone's shoulder to be a black line that would stretch out just because like a vertex was just
out of place.
Misrendered for whatever reason. But it's not like other games where all of a sudden people just start like morphing away or stretching, or their faces just stop animating or something, or any T-posing.
What do we even call that?
Artifacting? No.
Thank you. But yeah, it was only at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, it was like minor graphical glitches, not even like in gameplay, they're just in cutscenes.
Mm-hmm.
And that can just happen from port, and depending on like resolution and stuff that are being played, not everything scales well.
I love the headbangers. I haven't had a chance to say that, and we're already up to RNG, so I guess I love the headbangers. They were great.
They're so good. I love how they still gave them some depth to and some purpose and a little bit of backstory. You feel for them and their cause and what's going on with them, and you save them.
More than any other of the units, I think. They put more work into them.
Yeah, I think it kind of... They get a lot, and everything else kind of just falls off. You just get units. The big fist guys are cool, too. But like the headbangers really had like, some story behind them.
Yeah, they were the first one as well, so they had the whole lead up to like acquiring it. But then after that, they were just like, throw units at them, trying to fill it up.
Yeah.
RNG, there was none.
Nothing that's at least aware. It might just be minor things for a little bit more dynamic stuff, but I think, for the most part, there probably isn't really any.
There's nothing that we would want added either. Just so people know, we don't always give good for no RNG. We've given a bad for not enough RNG before. Funny how that works out.
Yeah. Sometimes you want things to be dynamic.
Yeah. That was Shadow of War. Needed more random events. Those were the best part of the game.
Yeah, and I think the loot too, the loot too could be a bit more, got to the point where it wasn't really anything great dropping.
Yeah, I mean,
just kind of junk that would drop.
I got a sword about halfway through the game. I was like, this one's good. And then it was just finding higher levels of that sword.
I would have loved this game in a style of Shadow War, though. Where it's kind of still like you're sieging, you're taking over like a base or a stage or a concert, but you don't have to do full RTS control. You just still have like micromanaging units. You've got your captains, and then you've got just an endless horde of just lemmings just to go and fight. And I think that style of fighting would have been cool too, where you have, like your battle axe, but you can still pull out your sword for like ranged combat, or your guitar for ranged combat, and have finishing moves and counters and stuff like that. Way more than anything could have been done in the time that this game was done. But if anyone ever makes a game in this style again, I would love to see it like that. But it also sucks that they've copyright or patented the Nemesis system, so only they can actually use that.
That sucks. Maybe they need to make one. Actually, remember I was saying spiritual successor to this, using Death Clock.
Yeah. It's too bad Death Clock also isn't making anything new anymore.
Yeah. So to finish this up, Control.
It's okay. It's the driving and stuff is better than I thought it was going to be. The combat is like I don't know how much of it's just the combat design just doesn't feel great, but I felt like I get kind of would get frustrated sometimes with like trying to target the right thing and attack the right thing. There is not really anything too clear what I'm doing. And then mounting stuff and it was fine. Like I don't know if it was anything that would like was fantastic about it. It could have been a lot smoother, but definitely not wasn't too frustrating for a lot of the time.
Yeah, I was good with the combat controls. Like I said, the driving actually felt pretty good, but the RTS was just clunky.
Yeah.
Very clunky. Very, very clunky to control. Very awkward. Always trying to think about what button I should be hitting. And it's not that they did it super poorly. It's just that RTS doesn't translate to a controller very well at all.
No, it's hard because you want to be able to select certain units and you kind of just get, banner and you kind of just select all and A-click is kind of how it rolls out to be.
Yeah, they had that system where you can like run up to a specific unit and hold Y and highlight them and then like send them to the mark that you've set, but it was so clunky. It was just fucking clunky trying to do it. It was a pain in the butt. I never used it. I think I used it once, and that was only because they put me in a situation where I had to use it. They also had the thing where you can jump on top of a unit and control it, and that seemed entirely pointless other than when they force you to use it a couple times in the story.
Yeah, it could be useful, but I'd say it's never like the game never puts you in a situation where you have to use that strategy, so it just fizzles out. It's cool that you can jump on the base guys and do a lot of damage, or pile up with the headbangers and run through, but there's never a situation where you have to. So then it kind of just it falls flat. You don't feel rewarded or satisfied for actually using it, rather than it's just kind of gimmicky.
Menu heavy games always feel like ass on a controller when time is of the essence. Yup. I've seen a couple do okay, but it's about designing the menus around the controller. Super festival covering dozens of genres of music, with each region covering a particular genre. And you could have multiple festivals still, different concerts happening each. There's lots of ways to do it without just upsizing the show.
Yeah, well, I mean, like using Shadow of War as an example, like they have the siege of like a base, right? There's always an attack and a defending for that stuff, and the defending, it doesn't always have to be a town. It could just be like a pretty large concert, and you're just showing up with like a small rag tag, so you have a smaller venue, or maybe you're just like playing out of the tour bus or something like that. And there's other avenues that could have gone there.
I worked with a band that did that, actually, in high school. They would load up their cabs and everything in the van, and we'd show up out front of like a major concert. And while everyone's walking out of the concert, they start playing on the streets and just selling albums and stuff right there.
Because it could have been an interesting mechanic in that sense, where like it could have been like a tour, right, where there's already a band touring and they have these concert venues set up, and then you kind of just take them over, and that's what you're doing, is you're taking over the stage and then playing the show, and that's what generates revenue for your faction. And you kind of go through, and generating fans, which I guess could be the currency, or more fans generate more currency or more resource or whatever it is. But that could have been how it is, right? You were tour bus going from these different concerts, and in this world, it's a world of metal, so it makes sense that the concerts would probably just be on all the time, and you kind of just take them over, and that's kind of how that works.
It could be very similar to the situation in the 80s where, and this actually happened, it's one of my favorites, the same venue. Okay, one first it was Guns N' Roses with Metallica opening for them. And 1 year later, to the day, in the same venue, Guns N' Roses opened for Metallica. That's the kind of situation you could be trying to recreate. You're growing. Who gets to headline the stage? Who gets the big stage? Who has to be attacked? Stuff like that. It happens. There's a lot of conflict that you can draw on there.
And it could lead to things like, boss fights on the stage become more like solo fighting, stuff like that. You can get to like the dual sense. That's a controller. It can get more into like a dueling kind of mechanic, right? Like you fight to take over the thing, and then you have to duel the current headliner to take over the stage.
Yeah, guitar duels on stage. We could recruit. You could get more musicians in there. Have a bunch of famous guitarists. Who doesn't want to have that duel against Tom Morello on the stage at the end? Jazz fans versus metal fans. Jazz fans win.
Just so chaotic.
Yeah. The metal fans just can't read what they're doing. They have no idea how they're going to approach. Metal fans
through time.
The metal fans count to 4, and the jazz fans count to 7 and win.
Count to 27. They're in a different time, man.
Yeah, use the Guitar Hero mechanics to compete against the AI. That's kind of what we were saying. Where you have to be playing your solos and stuff against each other. Because you already have that in there as solos in the game. No, it would just be looking at everybody who claims to listen to metal and saying, "You're not metal." That's my experience with them. So we're in agreement then on the okay for Control.
Yep.
The combat is fine. The car was actually quite good. However, the RTS elements are super clunky and unintuitive on the controller. As long as I leave with the waifu at the end, I'm good. And we did. No, wait, we didn't. We just go back to our own time by ourselves. Don't we? No, we come back and take her back.
No, you just leave.
Oh, yeah.
No, she cries a black tear on the cliff as you drive off. Because you got some errands to run.
Metal fans, I read that. Okay. And so we're at an okay writing, which is honestly way better than I expected. Like, when I came into this game, I was not expecting the writing I got. It wasn't super amazing, but it was still way better than I expected. The LDR version of this review should be that it has Lemmy, that is all. It has Jack Black too. And Ozzy.
Yeah, and Rob Halford. It's got quite a bit.
Oh, I didn't know Rob Halford was in it. You didn't even say that when we were talking about it earlier. There you go. Halford was in it too. Sending me an image of it?
No, can't remember the character's name for some reason.
Oh. The audio is good, which it should be.
It's the Baron.
Baron?
People with all the bass, I think. Unless that's Killmaster. I can't
No,
remember.
That's Killmaster was the bass. Fire Barons. Yeah,
it's Rob Halford.
That was David Bowie, the guy with the wingy hair.
That was also Rob Halford. General Lion White.
Really?
Yeah.
So it wasn't Bowie?
No, it wasn't voiced by Bowie. It might have been inspired, but it was.
Oh yeah, no. The inspiration of the design was Bowie.
Yeah, he was voiced by Rob Halford, which is neat.
Interesting. Hey Rob, we need you to voice Bowie. What? I'm sure that would be a conversation to have with him.
Yeah.
All right. So we came in and we flat out said we want to give everything good, but we did our best to be objective. We did our best. And we had chat to peel us back when we needed to. Though they didn't do much peeling. They just mostly agreed with us again. Stop agreeing with us. It feels weird that we're not giving away games anymore. We've been doing it for so long.
Yeah. I forgot that there wasn't a 15-minute buffer for that part.
Yep, it's gone. It's done. We've given them all away. However, we haven't actually delivered them all. So, Ilarox, Art of Fighting, Mr. Grimm, and Talos Wind and BPN Gaming I can hopefully trap down. But if any of you are here, you're not in Discord or you're by a different name, shoot me a message so I can give you a game. Watched the documentary on Lemmy a few months ago. I was shocked to learn he was actually a gamer. A surprising number of people are actually gamers.
Gamers are people. It doesn't take any special characteristics. Anyone can play games.
A lot of metal bands are because it's the most tour-heavy genre. It's something to do on the road. Makes sense. Sure beats drinking yourself into a unconscious stupor like metal bands used to do. But, you know, what else are you going to do on the road?
You still got the 4 days left in your road trip. You're probably feeling pretty rough after that first one.
No, they still do that. I know they still do, but gaming beats doing that, I'm saying. Maybe if you ply me enough, you'll hear stories of when we threw a broken table out a third-story window while we were on tour. That's the thing that happened.